Okay. So during the last session, we talked about different types of questions. So we're going to go over those. So I pulled up the site that we used last time. So the different types of QAR, we talked about all 4 last time. So the first 2 that are in the book are right there, which is where if I'm holding the book in front of me, I can, and the question is, how many books did the main character read? The sentence in the book would say the main character, or whatever the main character's name is, read 4 books. So we can find it, it's right there, you can see the sentence in the story. Then also in the book is the answer could be in several different places. So you might look and see a line here, and then you might have to turn the page and oh, there's another line. You put those 2 together, and then you have to think about it. You can't just pull one sentence out of the book and that's the answer. You have to actually think about it and search for the answer, but it will be there in the book.
Okay.
And then we have the 2 in my head questions. The first one is author and you, which is where you think about what you know and you also think about what the author says. So you might have to reread something a little bit, think about how you know something and what's in the text that fits together, and you can make predictions. So that is when the answer is not in the text. You won't be able to just pick out a sentence. You'll have to think about it, and you might have to go back through and reread some things so that you know what the author is trying to say. Okay, so if you ever see a question where it says, like, what do you think the author wanted you to know or wanted you to think about this? That would be an author in you. You'd have to go back and maybe reread some of the author's opinions and think about what you know and then answer that question. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So the on my own question is another in my head. And that answer you're not going to just find in the text either. You're going to have to think about what you've already know and think about things that you've read before and make connections between those and then answer the question. So it might be more of an opinion question. Anytime that it says, what do you think? Like, what do you think happened? Or why do you think this happened? That would be an on my own question where you're not going to be able to pull an answer out of the book or out of the text. You're going to have to really think about it to answer the question. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll leave that up there. That's our QAR poster. We're going to practice again today with the 4 types of questions. And to start, we are going to listen to a story. And the story is called The Story of Ruby Bridges. Okay? So this is the sheet that we are going to read. This is the sheet we're going to do at the end. And I'm going to give it to you now so that maybe you can look over the questions so that when you're listening to the story, you can be thinking about the answers. So there's 2 parts to this. The first part is you're going to have to decide what type of question it is, and you're going to write that on the line. And then the second part is you're going to have to actually answer the question. Okay? But we're going to do the first couple together, so you don't have to worry about those. But I just want you to have it so maybe when you're listening to the story, you can try and look for the answers to the questions.
What does QAR mean?
Question, answer, response.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, gosh. Question, answer, relationship. God, I didn't even say it right. So it's the relationship between a question and its answer.
Oh,
It's
okay.
how did you find the answer to the question? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Gosh, I can't believe I said the wrong thing. Question, answer, relationship, not response. All right. So let me pull up the story. Turn the volume up here. And if you want to, we can re-listen to parts, or if you want to listen to the whole thing again, we can listen to the whole thing again. You just let me know.
Okay.
All right. Whoops. All right, here we go.
I'm Miss S. Today, we are going to read The Story of Ruby Bridges, written by Robert Coles and illustrated by George Ford. This book was suggested by Miss St. Cecile's 3rd grade class. Thank you. Ruby Bridges was born in a small cabin near Tylertown, Mississippi. We were very poor. Very, very poor, Ruby said. My daddy worked picking crops. We just barely got by. There were times when we didn't have much to eat. The people who owned the land were bringing in machines to pick the crops. So my daddy lost his job. And that's when we had to move. I remember us leaving. I was 4, I think. In 1957, the family moved to New Orleans. Ruby's father became a janitor. Her mother took care of the children during the day. After they were tucked in bed, Ruby's mother went to work scrubbing the floors in a bank. Every Sunday, the family went to church. We wanted our children to be near God's Spirit, Ruby's mother said. We wanted them to start feeling close to Him from the very start. At that time, Black children and white children went to separate schools in New Orleans. The Black children...
Okay, so have you learned in school about segregation? About
Yeah.
how in the 50s and the 60s, blacks and whites were kept separate? So that's the case for Ruby. Ruby was a child in 1957, so she would be going to a separate school than the white students.
were not able to receive the same education as the white children. It wasn't fair, and it was against the nation's law. In 1960, a judge ordered 4 black girls to go to 2 white elementary schools. 3 of the girls were sent to McDonough 19. 6-year-old Ruby Bridges was sent to 1st grade in the William France Elementary School. Ruby's parents were proud that their daughter had been chosen to take part in an important event in American history. They went to church. We sat there and prayed to God, Ruby's mother said, that we'd all be strong and we'd have courage and we'd get through any trouble. And Ruby would be a good girl and she'd hold her head up high and be a credit to her own people and a credit to all the American people. We prayed long and we prayed hard. On Ruby's first day, a large crowd of angry white people gathered outside the France Elementary School. The people carried signs that said they didn't want black children in a white school. People called Ruby names. Some wanted to hurt her. The city and state police did not help Ruby. The President of the United States ordered federal marshals to walk with Ruby into the school building. The marshals carried guns. Every day for weeks that turned into months, Ruby experienced that kind of school day. She walked into the France school surrounded by marshals, wearing a clean dress and a bow in her hair, and carrying her lunch pail.
Can you imagine being 6 and walking into school every day with cops with big guns because people were protesting because they didn't want you to go there?
Can we go back like a couple times from the police part?
You want to go back now, or do you want to go back, like finish listening and then
Finish this.
finish listening? Yeah, and then we'll go back. Yeah, I know. I was looking too at
Yeah.
the questions. Yeah, sure. Yep. So we'll finish listening and then
Ruby
go back.
walked slowly for the first few blocks. As Ruby approached the school, she saw a crowd of people marching up and down the street. Men and women and children shouted at her. They pushed towards her. The marshals kept them from Ruby by threatening to arrest them. Ruby would hurry through the crowd and not say a word. The white people in the neighborhood would not send their children to school. When Ruby got inside the building, she was all alone, except for her teacher, Miss Henry. There were no other children to keep Ruby company, to play with and learn with, to eat lunch with. But every day, Ruby went into the classroom with a big smile on her face, ready to get down to the business of learning. She was polite and she worked well at her desk, Miss Henry said. She enjoyed her time there. She didn't seem nervous or anxious or irritable or scared. She seemed as normal and relaxed as any child I've ever taught. So Ruby began learning how to read and write in an empty classroom in an empty building. Sometimes I look at her and wonder how she did it, said Miss Henry. How she went by those mobs and sat here all by herself and yet seemed so relaxed and comfortable. Miss Henry would question Ruby in order to find out if the girl was really nervous and afraid, even though she seemed so calm and confident. But Ruby kept saying she was doing fine. The teacher decided to wait and see if Ruby would keep on being so relaxed and hopeful, or if she gradually began to wear down, or even decide that she no longer wanted to go to school. Then one morning, something happened. Miss Henry stood by a window in her class, as she usually did, watching Ruby walk towards the school. Suddenly, Ruby stopped, right in front of the mob of howling and screaming people. She stood there facing all those men and women. She seemed to be talking to them. Miss Henry saw Ruby's lips moving and wondered what Ruby could be saying. The crowd seemed ready to kill her. The marshals were frightened. They tried to persuade Ruby to move along. They tried to hurry her into the school, but Ruby wouldn't budge. Then, Ruby stopped talking and walked into the school. When she went into the classroom, Miss Henry asked her what happened. Miss Henry told Ruby that she had been watching and that she was surprised when Ruby stopped and talked with the people in the mob. Ruby became irritated. "I didn't stop and talk with them," she said. "Ruby, I saw you talking." Miss Henry said, "I saw your lips moving." "I wasn't talking," said Ruby. "I was praying. I was praying for them." Every morning, Ruby had stopped a few blocks away from school to say a prayer for the people who hated her. This morning, she forgot until she was already in the middle of the angry mob. When school was over for the day, Ruby hurried through the mob as usual. After she walked a few blocks and the crowd was behind, Ruby said the prayer she repeated twice a day, before and after school. "Please God, try to forgive those people, because even if they say those bad things, they don't know what they're doing. So you could forgive them, just like you did those folks a long time ago when they said terrible things about you." By the time Ruby was in second grade, the mobs have given up their struggle to scare Ruby and defeat the federal judge's order that New Orleans schools be desegregated so that children of all races might be in the same classroom. Year after year, Ruby went to the France school. She graduated from it, then went on to graduate from high school. The end.
All right.
I hope you enjoyed reading the story of Ruby.
Okay, so the comprehension sheet. So remember, we have to decide what type of question it is, and then we will answer the question, okay? So the first one says, what was the name of the elementary school that Ruby Bridges attended?
William France Elementary School.
Good. Okay, so we know the answer. What type of question do you think that is? Do you think it was, first you can, one of the easiest ways to do that, since these two are both in the book and these two are both in my head, decide which one it is of those first, and then look and see whether it's which one of the two it is. Does that make sense? It's kind of confusing.
Oh.
But you can decide if it's in the book, like if we could find that answer in the book,
Okay.
or if you have to come up with it in my head. So do you think you could find that answer right there in the book?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know it's this kind. Is it right there, or would you really have to think about that one and search for it?
I think it's right there.
Yeah, we can see exactly. It says Ruby attended the William France School.
Yeah.
So we would write, sorry, I made you a pen. We would write, you're welcome. We would write right there for the QAR. That's the type of question it is. It's right there in the text. And then the answer was the William France School.
Do I have to? Can I just write William France, or do I have to write elementary school too?
You can just write school. I think it was just called the William France School.
Okay.
Perfect, yep. So the second one, why didn't the city and state police help Ruby on her first day of school?
That's the one that I wanted to go
Okay,
back on.
let's go back and listen to that. So that's when she was picked to go. That's when she prayed about it in church. Let's start
And
there.
we get through any trouble. And Ruby would be a good girl, and she'd hold her head up high and be a credit to her own people and a credit to all the American people. We prayed long and we prayed hard. On Ruby's first day, a large crowd of angry white people gathered outside the France elementary school. The people carried signs that said they didn't want black children in a white school. People called Ruby names. Some wanted to hurt her. The city and state police did not help Ruby. The President of the United States ordered federal marshals to walk with Ruby into the school building. The marshals carried guns. Every day for weeks, that turned.
Okay, so do you think that one's in the book or in my head?
In the book.
Okay,
Wait, no, in my head.
in my head. I would say it's in my head too. Do you think you could think about that on your own, or do you think it's something that the author probably is alluding to and that you could think about it and use what the author said?
Probably author and me.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, so we can write author and me for the type of question, because you're going to use information the author gave you in the story, and you're going to use information that you know. So why do you think that?
Maybe because the police, because it says in the book how people wanted to hurt her and they didn't like it, so the police probably didn't like the idea of her going to that school because.
Yes. Perfect, yeah. The police probably didn't want her to go either. I mean, these were times where a lot of people, even the police, were racist.
Yeah.
And they didn't want the desegregation either. Desegregation, goodness. It's a tongue twister.
Should I put in the book how it says that people wanted to hurt her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Like they just like this, or?
No, you can put that. You can say, yeah, that would be your reasoning, right? The author said, people want to hurt her.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want you to try and do 3, 4, 5, and 6 on your own. But if you're struggling, I'm more than, I can help. It's no big deal.
Okay.
Remember, you can look up here, and you can also, if you want me to replay something, just let me know too.
Okay.
I'm going to leave this up right here so that you can see the 4 different types of questions and the descriptions of each of them.
Okay.
Okay? So let me know if you want me to replay something or if you need some help. So that one says, why do you think that Ruby did not say anything to the angry crowd? First, you got to decide what type of question you think it is, and then the answer to the question.
Do you want me to tell you or just write it?
You can just write it, and then we'll go over them.
does courageous mean?
Okay, so why do you think Ruby was so courageous? Courageous means that she was brave. So why do you think she had so much courage is what's inside of you when you do something, even though it might be super hard or what am I trying to say? Like it takes courage to go to a new school, maybe, after you've been at a different school your whole life. Courage is what makes you brave and allows you to do something that might be super hard for you.
Okay.
So why do you think she was so courageous? Why was she so brave?
What were those guards that were by
The
her?
Marshals.
Marshals. How do you spell it? Oh,
Marshals.
That's what I thought. I wasn't sure. Okay.
Okay.
So we're back.
Nope.
Okay.
All right, so number 3, why do you think that Ruby did not say anything to the angry crowd? So you said that one was an on my own, okay? She didn't want to make them more angry and knew that God would help her. Good, yeah. She also prayed for them too, so she kind of was like saying something to them in her own mind, so she didn't have to say anything out loud.
Yeah.
Good, that one's good. 4, why do you think Ruby was so courageous? You said author and me. Because she knew God would help her and there were marshals by her side to help. Good. So author and me, you used what the author said, that there were marshals, and you added that to what you knew was that, and the author also said that she prayed and thought that God would help her.
Yeah.
And you applied that to what you knew about Ruby and said that that was why she was so courageous. Good. Number 5, what do you think you would have done if you were Ruby Bridges? That one's definitely on my own because they're asking for your opinion.
Yeah.
And you said, I would still keep going to the school and keep learning, which is what she did. So you'd kind of do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Good. And then the last one, what do you think the author wants you to learn from this story? Definitely author and me, because it's asking you, okay, here's what the author told you. What would you do? Just keep trying and don't judge people just on how they look. Perfect, right. Very good. All right, so you got all of those correct. Okay, so we can pull that down. And so we did those. So when we do our next session, what we'll do is either listen to another story or we will read another story.
Okay.
And then you will have to come up with both. It'll be a sheet like this. You'll have to come up with the type of question that it is. And you'll have to come up with the question. And then you'll have to label what type of question it is. And then I will answer the questions. So you'll have to come up with the questions instead of me coming up with the questions. And I'll answer them instead of you answering them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now we're going to go to the accidental cheerleader, which we're on chapter 12. Close out of that. See, whoops. There we go. Okay, so we're going to partner read. So I'm going to have you start, and then I will pick up on the next page, and we'll go from there. Okay?
Wait, do I start?
Yep, you're going to start. So chapter 12.
Kylie wasn't
Yep.
speaking to Sophie. When Sophie called Kylie's house on Saturday, Miss Lovett said that Kylie wasn't home, but Sophie was almost sure she'd heard Kylie's voice in the background. She called again Saturday afternoon and again on Sunday. By Sunday night, it was clear that Kylie wasn't calling back. Sophie didn't know why Kylie wasn't talking to her. On Monday, she caught her at her locker and confronted her. Kylie had just swished her hair and said, "Why don't you ask your cheerleader friends?" Sophie couldn't ask her cheerleader friends, though, because they weren't talking to her either. That Monday, at practice, when Sophie asked a question about a cheer, Keisha turned to Courtney.
And said, "Do you hear something?" Sophie repeated her question, but no one would answer or even look at her. For the rest of the day, whenever Sophie tried to speak, Keisha or Courtney started talking over her, as if Sophie were nothing more than an annoying fly buzzing in the background. The twins caught on. By Tuesday, Sophie couldn't so much as say hello without them laughing hysterically. The other cheerleaders wouldn't speak to her either. Kate and Tricia snubbed her in the halls. Amy, Angie, and Joy wouldn't make room for her at their table at lunch. When they couldn't avoid her, they ignored her. On Wednesday, Sophie cornered Angie in the bathroom and asked her what was going on. "Well, I'm not completely sure," said Angie, watching the door as if she feared Keisha might walk in any minute. But the twins told Amy that they heard Courtney telling Keisha that you were all over Scott at the dance. Scott is Keisha's ex-boyfriend, you know. They went out for 3 weeks last year. "I didn't know that," Sophie told her. "But I wasn't hanging on Scott. I swear I don't even like him." Angie just shrugged and edged out of the bathroom door. Sophie wondered why Kate hadn't stuck up for her. Kate knew that Sophie didn't like Scott. Sophie had told her in the note in math class. So why was Kate being mean to her now? I'll zoom back in so you can... There you go, so right there.
So why was Kate being mean? Wait, didn't you just...
Yeah, right there.
And was that why Kylie was mad too? Because she thought that Sophie liked Scott? Sophie would have liked to ask someone these questions, but there was no one to ask. Not Joel, who hadn't so much as looked at her since the night of the dance. Not Amy or Angie, who hadn't spoken to her in over a week. Their awe of Keisha seemed to outweigh their natural instinct to be friendly. After Sophie's interrogation in the bathroom, they had gone out of their way to avoid her. Not even her parents had much to say to Sophie these days. They had a lot to say when they received the latest credit card bill, which arrived the Monday after the dance.